All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining the initial episode of Fireside Chats with Freddy. I'm very, very honored to have John and Warren on tonight and Cinema Lords. Just a little introduction as to what this show is before we get started. This is intended to be a supplement to Mike and the Minifans. That's a Friday show. Some people have speculated that that show is fleeting. I'm not saying that. Some people are saying that. So this is sort of an early to midweek supplement to the show, a parenthesis, if you will. John, good to have you on. Thoughts on being on the maiden voyage of this Fireside Chats with Freddy?
Freddie, thank you for having me. I certainly appreciate it. And if I may, I would like to sort of set a tone here as well. Fireside show. So I just want to get a little vibe going on my end. And we shall start the show. Thank you again, Freddie.
Excellent. Thank you. Cinema, good to see you.
Good to see you thoughts, as well,
buddy. Where does this rank in the pantheon of honors in terms of YouTube streams that you've been on?
Probably the highest, I would imagine. Right up there.
Perfect.
Either this or being on the first episode of Kane's 3 Up, 3 Down.
Ooh,
it's a tough 1-2 battle.
Those are, yes, quite the competition. Before we get it, I do have a couple things we want to talk about. This show is not going to be 5 minutes. It's not going to be 5 hours. It'll be somewhere in between. But before we do start, this episode is brought to you by Moxie Soda. Distinctively different, just like Kirk Minahan. Thank you to Moxie Soda for sponsoring this episode. All right, so let's just get to it. Since the top 50 list came out, Cinema was the biggest snub. I'll lay it out for people that aren't familiar. I was on the committee that came up with the top 50 list. And Cinema wasn't on it, but everybody else from the basketball team was on it. So, I wanted to hear Cinema's thoughts. Are you angry? Are you sad? Are you hungry? Are you lonely? Where do you fall on the spectrum of feelings? Or are you over it, or do you not even care? However you feel, I'm ready to respond.
I'm definitely not mad about it. I did think it was kind of comical at the beginning, just because seeing some of the names on there. For instance, Steve, who might be in next week, who I, killed. I hung his pelt on my wall. So how he got on the list ahead of me confuses me. But I digress. John was actually the first one that mentioned it. I have my eyes set on a different prize, and that's the one I'm going for.
Wow. Minifan of the Year, shots fired. Cinema is shooting for that award. John, what did you think about Cinema not being on the top 50 list and everybody else on the basketball team was?
Because everyone else on the basketball team was, I do feel like Cinema deserved it. I feel like there's a case to be made that he would deserve it outside of that. So my thought is either put everyone on the basketball team on, or I saw some people float out, why don't you just make one spot B-ball team? And that just kind of encompasses everybody. I think he deserved to be on it. And the thing is, Freddie, you thought you were inviting Cinema and I on tonight, but it was actually us cornering you to kick your ass about this whole thing. So listen, Freddie, I thought it was, and I think I said this to you in another chat somewhere, but when you released your 50 to 100 list or 50 to 75 list, I can't remember what exactly it was, and you put Cinema as 51. I don't know if you did that to be funny, but if you did, that was pretty funny. I got to chuckle out of it.
It's fucked up. We had such a good time at Saco. It hurt. That hurt. You hurt, Freddie.
All right. So a couple things. And I would say if we were ranking the top 10 storylines in the history of KMS, the basketball team as a whole has a spot on that list. When you're looking at the top 50 individuals that have had an impact, and this is not a whole list show, so everybody calm down. This conversation will be over in 2 minutes. Relax. But I'm going to answer it in a couple different ways. From the committee perspective, so from the committee perspective, the list came out 1 through 50. You weren't on it. If I had to speak for the committee, because we were a team, I would say just because you were on the basketball team didn't make you on the list. Like everybody else on the basketball team that made the top 50 did something else above and beyond in the history of the show to get them there. I would actually argue everyone except John and Warren. I think if that's the bar, I think maybe John should have been left off as well. But here's where like it gets tricky.
Anytime John is
on
like
stage
tied
in Portland,
sorry.
no shirt on, but
Wow, that's so funny. I dead ass.
I
That's exactly what I was just gonna say. I was gonna say anytime that there's like a tie, like if there's a close like tiebreaker, John literally, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Took his shirt off and danced on stage for like 5 minutes for the good of the show. So I think he gets the nod.
That is a great point. Excellent point by John. But to be fair, so my personal list, I didn't have either of you in it. I didn't have Pat. I didn't have Beanbag Ron. I had all four of you were not in my top 50. And the other people on the basketball team had contributions far above and beyond. Some were producers, some were bigger parts of the show. So like it's as unfair as it is. When I'm looking at that list and trying to get it down to 50, I am looking at you like an NFL draft prospect and you are a piece of meat. What did you do for the history of the show? So if I were to make my top 5 people that I wanted to hang out in with Sacco, Cinema, you're in the top 2 or 3. Like you're one of the best guys out there. There's no question about that. Unfortunately, that doesn't factor at all into the top 50 list.
That was nice.
It's strictly impact on the main show. So there's no hard feelings, no disrespect. That's just the strict criteria that I was using as a, ironically, sober and impartial judge of how things fell onto the list. So that's sort of my personal perspective. Like I said, the basketball team for me, it was a major storyline, but just being on the team wasn't enough to get you in there. But, you know, if Kirk says you're a snub and everybody says you're a snub, then you're probably a snub. I also didn't have Steve from Gloucester on the list. I didn't think he should have been in the top 50. But you know, that's sort of, you know, putting a bow on it. You know, I don't know if my reasoning makes sense or helps or hurts or what do you think about it?
I will say if I was actually just doing my own list, I would have Steve from Gloucester on it for sure. As much as I don't like the guy, he's driven a lot of content, especially over the last year. Yeah, that's like he's talked about. He's always, even when he's not on the show, he's been talked about. So it's constantly a conversation, fair. Even if it's just for a few minutes. It's a constant topic. So
that's a totally fair argument.
Yeah, the drops do. Good call.
One thing I want to say about the list, and I know Freddie, you probably want to move on from it, but after the fact, I completely understand your rationale, Freddie. And even when Menners kind of talked about what he was looking for, I get that too. But a lot of that was again after the list was dropped. I didn't really understand what the criteria was beforehand. And a lot of that confusion for me actually came from Kirk, believe it or not, because when he was talking about some of the people, whether they should be on the list or not, he would say things like, oh, you're just, that's recency bias. But then he would talk about another person and say, well, where have they been lately? So I was sitting there as a listener going, well, what is it? Is it recency bias or where have they been lately? So I was confused on what the criteria actually was until you guys explained it after the fact.
Yeah, and I apologize because I know not everybody watching this show watched me on Kane's KMS Top 50 3 Up 3 Down special with Kevin from Bristol. But I did explain it there. You know, the show, the 5-year history of the show. Where do you rank in the pantheon of the history of the canon of the main Kirk Minahan show? And Kirk sort of defined this a year ago, and from the day they started talking about it, it was blurry and confusing because that day Cullinane tweeted out top 50 minifan list, and it was never top 50 minifan list. So it was blurry and confusing from the beginning.
Right.
So when Menners decided to rekindle a committee this year and do 50 for 50 for Kirk's 50th birthday, he could have been more clear about the criteria. But the criteria carried over from last year when they didn't actually fulfill their duty of what they were trying to do for the list last year. So last year's list in our mind didn't exist. We were just starting from scratch.
Fair.
If that makes sense.
And outside of the cinema snub, the list is fine. Every single person is going to have a different opinion. That's why you have a committee. You put something together. Not everyone's going to agree to it. I thought it was fine.
Yeah, my favorite part was when people would say this list is trash. I would say, okay, send me your list. Let's compare. Not one person sent me their list. Um, my first list that I made was a year ago when they started doing the committee, and me and Pat Ford sent our list back and forth before Pat was ever even, a bigger figure. Because like we'll get into as one of my little nuggets is that people like making lists, and there's a million of us out there. So we'll put a bow on that for now. My next topic is that Kane was in studio today. Before we get into his performance, he had a monumental endorsement for the Tim and Canton Minifan of the Year. And that man is on the stream right now. Cinema Lords, what did you think about Kane endorsing you? Did you like it, or do you think that that's maybe the kiss of death?
I didn't think it was the kiss of death. I mean, I think if Kirk keeps having him in studio, even if he is boring sometimes, which is most of the time, obviously he keeps bringing him in for a reason. So I don't think his opinion is completely invalid, and I'll take an endorsement anywhere I can get it right now. So good looks, Kane. I also thought today was his best performance on the show in studio. So
fair, all fair points. John, did you get reached out to by Shark Minahan to give an endorsement for the Tim and Canton Minifan of the Year?
I have been contacted, and I have given my endorsement. Yes, I
Wow.
will wait for Shark to release that. Yeah.
Wow, that's huge. Also, breaking during the show today, Greg Poehler submitted his endorsement through Shark Minahan for Mick. So I'm not sure if what kind of waves that makes in the world, or was Greg just jabbing Justin? What do we think?
Ooh,
call.
good call. Yeah,
it's a good call.
I would say, well, I will not give away my endorsement, but I will say I did not choose Mick. But I respect the pick of Mick on impact alone. So if he wasn't going to needle Justin and he was going on impact and conversation driving the show, I think that's a very respectable pick.
I like it. I've run the numbers myself. I think it's down to a 6-horse race. Mick's in the mix, Cinema's in the mix, and there's 4 others. But when it does come to today's show, we had Kane back in studio. I think it was his 3rd, maybe 4th time, coming off the heels of a horrible, horrible performance at the movie theater, just legless. Blackout. He said he wasn't hammered, but he was blackout. So I guess you can be blacked out but not hammered. Depends on how many cut waters you had. A couple LIT cut waters equals a couple bottles of wine. Who knows what? But I thought Kane came out hot out of the gate. He called Kirk out right away. He sort of came out jabbing. I thought he sort of fizzled during the middle of the show and then came alive at the end. He literally blamed Kirk for him getting hammered. He said, "Kirk, why didn't you kick me out? Why didn't you kick me out?
I don't hate that move.
And ironic is
that move.
He kicked himself out. He didn't stay the whole time.
Yeah. So what else did you think about Kane's performance on the show today?
At least for me, I thought the biggest takeaway for me was that today he seemed like he was the most like playful. Like it seemed like the first couple times he was in there, he was like very uptight. He wasn't like even like he wasn't laughing a lot. Like it seemed like he was just too tight. And it seemed like today that he was a lot looser and he was like having fun. And I feel like that was noticeable.
I agree. And not to take your takeaway, Cinema, but this was Kane's best show by far, I thought. By the way, real quick, I was at that theater show, and just to talk about Kane's performance there, he was definitely annoying. He spoke up a ton. Kirk had to yell at him at least 2 to 3 times. And as you guys know, if you watched the Aaron Hernandez show, that last episode, the show opens up with the Kirk and Jerry scene, right? They're in the studio. They start talking on the radio. I'm sitting down in the theater, and I'm kind of near the bottom. I'm sitting next to Kevin from Bristol, and that scene ends, and all of a sudden my shoulder starts shaking, and someone's grabbing at my shoulder. And I look back, and it's Kane. And he's going, I missed it, John. I missed it. I can't believe it. I was in the bathroom. What happened? You need to tell me what happened. And he was absolutely freaking out that he had missed the opening scene with Kirk in it. And I didn't know he left after that. I found out from facts on the show, because after the movie or the show ended, I kind of just got out of there. Didn't really see Kane, but he was distraught, to say the least, that he missed that opening scene.
Sad, especially when there was like at least two more good scenes still with Kirk coming down the road.
Right. I will also say that today, when he opened the show with calling Kirk sluggish,
That's right.
would you agree,
Yeah.
Freddie, that was a prepackaged line? He thought of that beforehand.
Yeah, and then he panicked and called him Sluggy.
Yes.
Said Kim is Sluggy.
Yes.
Like, yeah, I think Kane had a few things up his sleeve, and that was one of them. And it was good to see him a little more relaxed. He definitely owns the fact that he had a lobotomy at some point in his life, because he's like, yeah, supposedly. What do you mean supposedly? Maybe I'm just dumb. Like, he ges it. So
He actually was pretty good as just being part of the conversation today too. Like he didn't
Yeah.
really disrupt the flow of anything. I thought it was a good show for him, really.
and he had some good questions. So
He did have good questions.
Kane, take a step back. Don't be so good next time.
Oh, what are your thoughts on the whole bringing up the Pat Ford wife, saying he got the whispers from Don the jeweler?
Kane has a history of bringing up people's families when he's not supposed to, so I'm not surprised. He speaks out of turn often, and he thinks everything's on the table. He has stalked people in the past. He's talked about people's kids at Little League games. So, I'm back down on Kane. So thank you for bringing that up, John.
Yeah.
I do like that when he was pressed on it, he goes, "I don't know, Don the jeweler," with a question mark at the end of it.
He also, I don't think this was the same thing, but he brought up a rumor, and then within 30 seconds, it was squashed, and then he goes, "I'm glad we got that out of the way."
Yeah.
And Blind Mike caught it in the moment. He's like, "You just started that rumor, and then decided that it was squashed. Like, you brought up the rumor."
Professional.
So that was good.
It's good showing. Good showing.
Yeah. Anything to put a bow on today's show or on Kane's performance specifically?
I don't think so.
Blind Mike has seen every episode of the Hawk to a podcast. I'm
Sounds like
convinced.
it. I didn't
when
even know
Kirk-
she had a podcast.
Even when Kirk goes, "It sounds like you know a lot about her. You watched all these episodes." He didn't say no. He just laughed.
Yeah. It's a good point. That's a good
It's
point.
called research. He's in the business.
Yes, it is true.
You might run
Good
into her in Austin one time. Who knows? So before, let's see. Do you guys want to do trivia now or do it at the end? It's very quick. Just 3 questions, 2 out of 3.
Might be good to break it up. It's almost like a halftime.
Yeah. All right. Halftime. All right. I have 3 trivia questions. They're short. They're simple. Whoever gets 2 out of 3 wins bragging rights. That's it. I got nothing else for you. The 3 categories: Kirk and Callahan, Enough About Me, and Kirk Manhan's life. So I'll say cinema. Which one do you want first?
Enough about me.
Enough About Me. Okay, this is for both of you. So if anybody knows the answer, just yell it out, and we'll figure out who wins. So, Enough About Me. Okay. This guest on Enough About Me had an interview that was so bad, Kirk Minahan dubbed it The Anatomy of a Bad Podcast. And he paused and went back and broke down every segment of the interview because this person was such a bad interview. And I can do hints.
No, it's wrong. I was going to say Candace Owens, but that was on the Kirk show, wasn't it?
It's not Candace Owens.
Okay. Am I out then?
I don't think so. I think it's just
Okay.
Freeform Friday.
I know what
This person was in the movie Airplane.
What the fuck?
This
is the
person
person who didn't want to talk about.
This
certain
person was a
things?
professional athlete that wore goggles.
Kareem Abdul?
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Thank you,
Ah.
Cinema Lords. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Now I do remember that, saying how boring it was, and how I do remember that now.
Kareem just wanted to push his book or whatever he was pushing at the time, and he didn't answer any good questions. He had no sense of humor. It was It was something. All right, John. Next question is either going to be KNC or Kirk Minahan live.
KNC.
Okay. This former part-time casting couch member on Kirk and Callahan inspired the famous drop of his father saying, "I live in a motel."
I just talked about this literally at lunch the other day.
Is it Evan Drake?
Yes, Cinema Lord. Yes.
Yes.
Cinema's up 2-0. Well, we're going to do the third question.
Sure. He has one of my
By the way,
favorite
Evan
highlights.
Drake was fantastic.
Yeah, he was really good in the casting couch. He really was. There was one I always say. It was like he was like yelling at Kirk one time. He was like, "You got to try harder. You got to be better. You got to ask better questions. He was like, say your name." And I can't remember what the girl's name was. There was some headline in the news, but then he was screaming the name out. He's like, "Say your name." But Kirk and Jerry were just fucking dying. It was very funny. When he lost his shit, he was very funny, man. He would just get off the hinge sometimes.
Didn't he get sent to some random city after?
Like Houston or something?
Yeah.
I think so.
Maybe.
He was a trip. And the most like boring baseball guy that ever existed. He was lucky he got to be on the casting couch. It was very random.
The dad stuff was just brilliant.
Lives in a motel. Third question. What is the name of Kirk's favorite mini golf course growing up and up until it closed recently?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I can't remember either.
Okay. Hago Harrington's. Hago Harrington's, Main Street in Stoneham. It used to be Hago Harrington's, and it closed. Next to it was Big China Moon, old Chinese restaurant, and then on the other side of that, Papagino's. So, good spot.
That makes sense.
Main Street in Stoneham. So I don't. You guys are South Shore guys, so I get it. No big deal. So that was trivia. Moving on. I did want to call out Sneakers, not call out.
Careful.
He had an excellent call into the show maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago when they were taking calls on a Friday, and he called and said, "What were your producers doing instead of doing stuff for The Amazing Race?" And their answer, Kirk said, "That's a good question. What's your answer?" And they said, "We're working on green screen stuff for the election night coverage."
Fair.
Working on green screen stuff for the election night coverage. I don't know what that means. Like, they're producers for a major podcast. I think they could figure out how to put up a green screen. It was a horrible answer. It was a great point by Sneakers. And then election night came and there was no coverage and no green screen. So all that work, 20 minutes of Googling green screen, went to nothing. So I like the Friday calls. I like Sneakers actually calling out people. Like, Sneakers has a place in this world. He is in my top 5 minifans of the year, just for the record. So I'm curious where you guys land on like the Sneakers of the world and sort of how they fit in. And Kirk even mentioned the troll chat today on the show. So I'm curious, like, do you appreciate Sneakers? Do you hate him for being a troll? Where you fall?
I appreciate Sneakers, always have. I also appreciate his dedication. The guy does not miss a show. He's in every chat possible. And he's very, very hardworking. So one has to wonder how he is so hardworking and also spends time in the chat. Superhuman, a lot of people are saying. I think he's got a place in the world, and he should almost be given a question per week to pose to either the producers or Kirk. I think that would be validated. Or validated.
I don't hate that. I kind of agree with exactly what you said, though. I also like appreciate like not just the commitment to watching every single thing, but just the commitment to like never breaking character. Like every single response is like a perfect Sneakers response. And there are some times where he gets me and I'm just like, he like impresses me. I'm like, wow. I'm like, everyone knows you're a douchebag, but like you are like a Hall of Fame level fucking MVP level douchebag. It's very impressive.
He's committed to the craft.
He really is. He makes me laugh so much.
If Kirk redid a Minifan Hall of Fame inaugural class, he might be in it.
Well, has to be.
Yeah, he's got commitment to the craft.
And it works because he is funny.
Yeah.
Like if you have some humor attached to it, it plays every time.
Yeah. And just to add a twist of cinema to this, we talked about Sneakers So while we are discussing the Scott Farkas and Grover Dill of the minifan world, Cinema, do you get that?
Not really.
Look it
I'm
up.
not
You'll
gonna lie.
laugh. You'll laugh later. Look it up. Memes. When I did do the 3 Up 3 Down with Kane and Kevin from Bristol, I made a comment that memes brought up at a later point. I said, there's 1,000 other people just like me making lists, and they care about the show, and I just happen to be someone that got noticed in the comments and threw on the screen, and I started recording, and I'm on a show now. Big deal, no big deal. But I do think that there's what I said was, I think that there's 1,000 other people like me that are doing lists on their own, and like Pat Ford and I were doing a year ago. And I revisited that thought. I thought hard on it, and I just wanted to say to memes, like, memes laughed at it. He thought it was hilarious because it was so dumb. I 100% stand by what I said. There are so many more people in this world. We know 100 or 150 people that we know their names and their faces, but there's tens of thousands of listeners of the podcast, and I would bet money that there's 1,000 people that they don't go in the YouTube chat, and they don't go on streams, and they don't do all this shit, but they love the show enough to they're making lists. They're doing shit for fun about the show. Like, just because the three of us are on screen right now doesn't mean we're a bigger or better fan than fucking, Jimmy down the street that, has listened to every show. I don't know. So that's my hot take on that. I stand by it, memes. Sorry. I hope you laugh at this. Thoughts?
See, that's been my problem with people before in this world, is that they think they're bigger than other minifans. So at the end of the day, we're all in the exact same boat. Whether you go into the show whenever you're a caller, whether you're on Twitter or on the network, or you're not even doing any of that, you're just listening. We're all in the same boat.
I used to put notes in my notes app, my iPhone, before I ever got on any show. I would just keep the notes just in case someone happened to ask me something. So yes, I do think there's people out there that are doing similar things. Absolutely.
For sure.
Plus, you go to live shows. Aren't there a ton of people you don't recognize?
Oh,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's maybe 100 people that we recognize, but there's 1,000 people that we don't, and they like the show just as much. They're just as passionate. They just don't go on these things because they have other shit to do, or they don't want their name or their face out there, probably with good reason.
If anything, we're psychotic. They're a lot more normal. Yeah.
I was gonna say, it wasn't for this show, but before the last season of Game of Thrones came out, I wrote a fan fiction that must have been 12 pages deep for every single episode and how I thought it'd play out.
You're like Michael,
significantly better than what actually happened, but that's people do crazy shit. They get invested.
Yeah. So, the movie A Christmas Story, Scott Farkas is the bully, and Grover Dill is the midget that he's like,
oh shit,
yeah,
all right.
get him, get him, Farkas.
Little fucker.
So, before my next nugget, cinema. I've met you in person. You're lovely. You're tall. You're gorgeous.
We had a great time.
Or are you not cousins with Marty Mush from Barstool Sports?
I think Kirk said that to me the first time I was in studio with him, 3 minutes of me sitting down. He was like, "You look like Marty Mush, but more brain damaged." I think it was. Pretty sure that was the line he said.
Because you get the look, it's adjacent, and the voice is adjacent too. I don't know what it is, but it sticks with me every time.
I think they're different accents, but they're equally awful, just from slightly different parts of the Northeast.
A Cinema and Marty Mush quick story is that when Barstool showed up to the basketball game in Berlin, Connecticut, you were ripping butts outside by your car, and there's a rumor that Marty Mush turned to someone, maybe Dana, and said, "Holy shit, is these the guys we're playing? They're ripping butts in the parking lot before
I hope that's true. That's fantastic.
That was the game we were expecting Coleman to get on the bus to go back to New York with that team.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
That was a good time. That was a lot of fun.
I say we the fans watching at home. I wasn't on the team.
There was a ton of fans there, though. I'll tell you that. That place was packed.
Yeah. What? Before I move on, how is? I mean, it's been talked to death, but you guys were both on the basketball team. Was it weird? Was it like surreal? I know cinema. I've heard like you and you're walking down the street and you get recognized. Like,
Oh
is that still
yeah.
going on?
I don't know. It's just been a couple times randomly here and there. Once was at a golf tournament,
Or
Target,
you could play it up. Come on, come on.
random places. But no, it was the basketball team was fun. I honestly, it's tough for me to think of anything besides like as soon as I'm in any competitive environment, it very much everything else like quickly fades, and I'm like very much like tunnel vision. Regardless of if we were down 20 or we were down 2, I tried to play as hard as I could on every single second that I was on that court. That's all I was thinking about was that.
Yeah, I felt it was surreal, but then after a while, it's just like a men's league that we weren't qualified for. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah.
And the games when I was playing them, or when we were playing them, I felt like I was giving my all, and then I would go home maybe the next day and watch it. The commentary obviously was fantastic, and I would watch myself move so slowly that I was like, how is it possible that I was moving that slow? In my head, I felt like I was moving as fast as I possibly could.
Hey,
it's never great to go back and watch people. Yeah, that too.
I think if I'd started playing men's basketball league tomorrow, I would tear something within 20 minutes.
That was a
fear. No question.
Yeah, always.
Just a couple other nuggets. I don't know if you guys know this. I'm guessing you don't. Today was the 980th episode of KMS.
Wow.
We're getting pretty damn close to 1,000. If my math is correct, we're going to hit 1,000 at some point early to mid-January. If we, let's say 3 shows a week without the Christmas week, without the New Year's week, we're looking mid-January. We're looking at show number 1,000. Do you think the producers have anything special planned? Or no?
Well, I was just going to say, before you said that on a recording, Freddy, did you think that Cullinane had any idea? I'm just trying to set you up for a Cullinane rant.
So I have been openly critical of Dave Cullinane, but on this, I'll give him credit. He's the one that told me that it was the 980th episode. I didn't expect him to know that at all, because for some reason you go into the Spotify or Apple, there's only it clogs up at 913 or something. So the first couple months of shows are just not there. And they've talked about this on the producer show before, but it's a back end issue. And for some reason it's just clogged. So you can't tell how many episodes there've been. So Dave actually told me it was 980. So for him to know that,
because you inquired though, right?
Correct. But he answered. I've never had someone answer a DM that quickly.
Oh wow!
Okay. With a penis. So he definitely knew right away.
Interesting. Well, that sort of leads me to think that maybe they do have, or at least they're going to have something planned.
Yeah, I would agree.
Why else would he know it was at 980?
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe they've been cataloging it just because they know it's coming up. I don't know.
Or maybe do you have to catalog it for Apple or anything? Maybe.
Could be. I don't know. I'm not a producer. I don't know the back end of anything.
You are today, Freddie.
I clicked a button. We recorded. So I thought that was interesting. I knew that 1,000 was coming up between now and Laconia. I didn't realize how close it was. So we sit here on the 18th of November. We're talking 2 months from now. We're going to be hitting episode 1,000, unless something crazy happens between now and then. Just thought that was an interesting bookmark to note for people that care. Whether it's one person or 10,000, I don't care. So let's see. I have some thoughts on the dozen. And again, if you care, good. If you don't, I don't care. But so Kirk mentioned today about the teams are moving around and Gruden and this and that. I'm going to assume that Gruden's not going to be on Team KMS, but he did allude to a show going away. A football show going away that would be bussing with the boys. And he also alluded to Caleb going away and Glennie going away with him. So I have created a scenario in my head where there's 3 members of Uptown Balls: Tommy Smokes, Glennie, and Smitty. It sounds like Glennie might be gone.
Right.
Smitty.
I have a hard time believing that. I get why, but I I have a hard time believing that Glenny's going to leave Barstool.
I agree with you, unless he's getting a bag from Caleb on his next venture with what's the Sunday conversation.
Sunday conversation.
Well, and he
That
might
show
feel like
gets
he
millions of
owes
views.
Caleb, because Caleb did, if I'm not mistaken, Caleb brought him into this world.
Yeah, he's the one that
Correct.
he got hired because he runs really fast. Believe it or not, actually.
Yes, he does. Yeah.
Yeah, Caleb hired him as an intern before you were allowed to hire people as an intern. It was beautiful. And he's still with him doing this Sunday conversation, which does get millions of views. If I have no idea what the market is for a person like Caleb, but if he says, I'm getting this bag and Glenny's getting this bag, and it's like a Carabas situation where it's way more than what Barstool is willing to do, because I don't know what value Glenny brings to Barstool. I just don't. I could see Glenny going with Caleb just to get that money. You know what I
I
mean?
can see it. Yep.
To do what though? Just to do like Sunday conversation? Like that seems like it's not really.
I'm sure that would be the main thing, and then there would be separate stuff. You know?
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
sure
he could look at the numbers he gets for that OnlyFans show he
OnlyStans?
does versus the numbers he gets for Sunday Conversation, and say to himself, okay, if Caleb's gone, I'm left with my primary thing at Barstool being the OnlyFans, and that's not, how long will that last? So could
or
look
he
at
could
it that way.
or he could morph it at whatever the new stop is, and instead of calling it Oldie Stands, call it whatever, and bring that as a value add
Oh,
to
sure.
Glenny Ball's fucking resume. I don't know. So
Forgive me for I didn't finish the episode today. I wasn't going to admit that on the show, but how serious was the Bussin' with the Boys talk about leaving? Is that pretty much a done deal?
very brief, very sort of in passing. Cullinane said there might be a football show that might be leaving.
Interesting.
So it was nothing hard, nothing fast. But that is leading me to my point, is that the trivia team of Uptown Balls had Tommy, Glenny, Smitty. I'm circling Tommy's name. And then the trivia team of the Big Screamin' Honkers had Will Compton, Fights, and Dana. If Will's gone, Glenny's gone, and Smitty's AWOL, I'm circling Tommy's name. I'm circling Dana Beer's name. And my pipe dream for Team KMS for the Dozen Trivia 2025 is going to be Kirk, Tommy Smokes, and Dana Beers.
Okay.
Knowing nothing, I know nothing. I know nothing.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But I'm just saying, what do you guys think about that?
I like the idea of him just going to the ponies, taking Compton's spot with Fights and Dana. I think that Tommy Smokes, I mean, he does like a lot of baseball, but that's probably Kirk's best sport, that and basketball. I feel like there's a lot of like cross between him and Tommy where
I feel like
having them together is.
I feel like where Kirk's baseball drops off is where Tommy's baseball picks up. It's like,
Okay, like time era wise, I got you.
Like 18, 20 years ago, like Tommy picks up everything and Kirk sort of drops off. Maybe 15 years ago, whatever. But I feel like they complement each other. And I think Tommy's pretty good at like music and like social celebrity shit.
Yeah, that's actually so that's where I was kind of actually thinking Fights was like the celebrity shit like that.
And Dana,
but yeah,
is
Tommy's not bad at it either. So
Dana is a force with college basketball and NBA. And again, it's sort of that gap where Kirk falls off in the 90s and Dana sort of picks everything up. And I know that's very sports centric, but the non-sports stuff on the Dozen, like Kirk kind of has that sort of, in the bag himself.
Yeah, I was going to try to insert Fights onto the team, but I think you've just convinced me otherwise.
I don't know what Fights' strengths are with trivia.
Not much.
He's
I mean, well, he's good at movies. He's really, really good at TV. That's probably his best is TV.
That's true. He knows the shows he knows them 100%. But
yeah, he also knows like you'd be surprised at how much like dumb like regular cable TV like he still like consumes like. Because I still listen to KFC, not like religiously like I used to, but I still listen to KFC radio sometimes, and like I feel like he's just seen like every TV show and he's just talking about them all the time. Nice. Obviously, like I think Celebrity Mashup too is another good one for him, at least. I'm saying.
Speaking of KFC, do you guys make anything of Kirk kind of rekindling the friendship with KFC?
Not really.
I
don't. Were they ever like totally not friends? I don't think that was a thing, right?
I thought he's brought him up a couple times now. I thought there was something to that.
I think if anything, it's a result of some Chicago fallout from surviving, which we don't know what that is yet. I don't know if it's, I don't know how serious it is, but Kevin wasn't in surviving. So,
Yep.
I think to Kirk, I think Kevin has always been a sounding board of the Barstool world as a whole in terms of how things sort of fit together and who's who and what's what, and what the dynamics look like.
And remaining in touch with the old guard, I think, as things change.
For sure. Yeah.
Uh,
Cinema thoughts on that?
Not too much to add, to be honest. Nothing that you didn't already kind of just hint at.
Well, so
Say,
we'll
straight
wrap
up.
it up. I know I'm a boring guy, and I'm not. I'm drip adjacent, self-proclaimed. Do you guys have any thoughts on Mick? I know they talked about him on the show a lot. I don't have much to add, but if you guys have Mick thoughts, shoot from the hip.
Cinema, go ahead.
I was a little surprised at the lack of fight from Mick last week. It took me by surprise a little bit. I don't know if that's just because he actually like maybe feels a little bit worse than he's letting on. You know what I mean? Because like we pointed out, he was obviously probably not in the best like mental, physical, all of that kind of shape. So he was probably not acting in his normal fashion. So I feel like him being a little bit more calm was probably him kind of almost acknowledging in a way that he doesn't feel great and maybe about the way he acted. But it's just my interpretation, I guess.
Yeah, it seemed like he was just ready to kind of move on to the next thing. And
Yeah.
Justin wasn't going to let that happen, which I don't really blame Justin. But
No.
as a maniac, if I think Justin probably won that exchange the day that Mick was in. But again, to play devil's advocate, I mean, Justin's okay with the pedo jokes, but I guess racism is where he draws the line. Unless, of course, everyone's ragging on Steve Robinson, and then racism jokes are funny again.
To be fair, it took a lot of pedo jokes before Justin was okay with it, because
that's true.
He voiced up about it a lot at the beginning.
That is true. That I did consider that, but I do think knowing. I think Justin says, like, if someone heard this that wasn't a fan of the show, they might have an opinion on what Mick is calling me and saying about my family. But to everyone who's actually listening and knows the context, these are jokes. So I don't really think anyone has necessarily crossed the line. Maybe today, the talking about Justin's dad. I totally get that. If I was Justin, I'd want to drink a bunch of IPAs and piss dark pee all over a gravesite too, especially because his dad listens. So I think that makes it tough.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Everything needs to be taken in context in this world, and not always. It isn't always taken into context. My take on Mick is that what I like for the show is when things make the show better, and I think Mick makes the show better. And you know why? Is because half the people hate him.
Yes.
And that just makes it better.
Yep.
Whether you like him or not, the more polarizing it is, I think that, people hate listen, people, that just is good for the show, in my opinion.
For sure. He creates a reaction.
Totally agree. And he's got something. I don't know what it is, but he definitely has something. And I think he's good on the mic.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. He's he's definitely like confident when he speaks. But like he's good at poking buttons sometimes. Like he is good at like getting under your skin sometimes, which is a skill.
Next time you listen to Mick speak, he is a master enunciator.
Yes.
He
Think about
says
it every time.
syllable. And I don't know if it's from the Kirk Minahan School of Broadcasting, but it's adjacent. So keep an eye on that.
Yep. And shout out to Justin for standing his ground. I'll say that. Yeah,
Justin's a good soldier. He's gonna do his thing. Mick's gonna do his thing. Let's see how it plays out. I'm all for whatever's best for the show. Last note, last nugget. We are less than 2 weeks away from the debut of this year's Surviving Barstool. It's been teased, it's been poked, it's been prodded. Do we have any fresh hot takes, or we're just kind of sitting and waiting?
I'm getting excited. I just joined a pool. I was contacted by someone who's not, by a bunch of people who aren't even really in the minifan world. They're They're just doing a survivor pool. I jumped in that. I've been
Barrington
trying to.
Pool Club.
That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I've been trying to pay attention to the people that Kirk's been high on to kind of get my clues. He said positive things about Roan.
A lot.
He's clearly still very friendly with Witt. He's been high on Clemmer lately. He keeps saying Gilly and Wallow are insane, so that I'm very much interested to see what happens with that.
Well, didn't they have a stipulation that they weren't going to go unless they could
Yes.
smoke weed every day?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on that.
And then he's hinted a couple times that people are really going to hate him after this, right?
I know he said that he like definitely like you're gonna get your money's worth as far as him like, you know, being amazing content wise and just exploding, I would imagine. Stealing papers from people's pockets, calling people's kids cunts. I would imagine something more drastic than that.
He did say the most dramatic moment in the history of reality TV is going to happen this season. So that means something, you know?
Master promoter.
Yeah. That I feel like that could be about
I
him
don't have
in
a hot
negative
take.
way.
There's just so much unknown.
You know what I need?
Yeah, there is.
It's coming out Cyber Monday, which is, as we're recording this 2 weeks from today. I need a couple fucking trailers to drop.
Yes.
So, hey, Jeff, I know you're watching this, Jeff, because you're still a finalist for Minifan of the Year. Get your team together, whip up a couple 90-second trailers, get us fucking excited for this, all right? Like, it's 2 weeks out. Don't wait until the day before to start promoting. Like, let's get the buzz.
I'd imagine it's got to be coming real soon. Right? Like I would say like probably in the next 7 days. I don't think
Yeah,
it'll be like the latest next Monday, I think.
He's going to
That's my-
hear this, and he's going to get a trailer out next week.
There we
Mark
go.
my words.
I like it. But yeah, no, you're definitely right. Like there definitely should be, if it is like that's coming up quick. So at this point, you should be able to at least like, yeah, no, that's a good point. It's definitely a good point.
So that's all I have for tonight. Inaugural episode, the maiden voyage of the Fireside Chats. I appreciate you guys being on. Hopefully, you know, maybe this is a show that gets us through the winter. Maybe it gets us through the next 2 weeks. Maybe it gets us through the next 2 years. I don't know. We'll find out. But any closing final thoughts before we sign off? John.
Oh, sorry if I look distracted. My buddy Kane's birthday is coming up real close, February 3rd. So I was looking up stuff on Amazon.
Day after Groundhog Day.
No. Great job, Freddie. Thank you for having me. No final thoughts. Great show. Hope to be on again.
Appreciate that. I definitely talked too much. Cinema.
That was a good time. No, I had a lot of fun. Thanks for having me. Happy to be a part of the first episode. And John, it's always a good time mixing it up with you as well. So
thank you.
I knew this was going to be fun. So good one.
You guys were on the first show of the new second best show on the network. I'll let you guys pick which one you think is the first. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.